welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Yeah,
It's always good to have you. Yeah.
Nice to sit together here.
And good to be, as those of you watching may have noticed, we are in person, which is a rare occurrence.
Yep.
Manny being based in Vienna, Austria, and me being in Chicago. We are today in Truro, Massachusetts.
Yep.
So Manny, what are we doing here?
We're doing like a 2-day workshop to plan out the rest of the year for each of our operating companies and for the holding company.
Yeah.
Lots of strategic thinking going on, and planning OKRs and stuff like that.
That's right. And it's fun to do it in a new place. It's always a little bit of an interesting challenge because we've got to work around family and dogs barking and weather being what weather is. So, but this is great. I'm excited to dive into what we've been up to the last quarter or so. Let's start it off with highlights. What's been exciting and fun for you the last few months?
Yeah, I think something very satisfying has been the growth of one of our operating companies. Podcast Consultant is growing 11% month over month at the moment, with not a lot of our personal input. So the team has really been great at executing, but also taking the bare bones of strategic ideas we presented to them and then running with it, and that's been working quite well. Of course, there's always things to improve, but in general, it's really enjoyable and fulfilling to see that working well.
Yeah, totally. I think, the first, so we've owned the business now for 2 years, a little over, and our, mission from day one has been, we want to figure out how to grow this thing a bit. We thought the previous owner did a great job getting it started, and it's it had a good foundation, and then we just saw a lot of opportunity to improve it. And then to summarize, in year one, I think we really focused on tightening up our contracts and getting, clients sort of on the same pricing structure and raising prices in general, not 100% across the board, but a lot of clients saw a price raise. And that helped us kind of eliminate some of the clients that were more trouble than they were really worth anymore, as well as continue to focus on the ones that were really getting the most out of their podcasts. And then in year two, we really you did a great job, I think, implementing and getting started the marketing push that has led to this growth in this, this year three, I guess, that we're entering. And so it's funny. A lot of people ask about what does it take to grow a service business? And sometimes the answer is just time and continued effort over a period,
Keep chipping away at it.
Yeah.
You gotta be patient.
Yeah. The other thing this makes me think about is so many business owners, especially agency owners, say things like SEO doesn't work for us. And it's based on a 3-month test. They wrote a few articles inconsistently and they say, we didn't get any leads from it. And of course they didn't, because it takes a year and a half to really start to show fruit.
Plus, you can utilize a lot of things that you are working on while working on SEO projects and repurpose them for other channels that then, have an impact.
Yeah.
But again, over time, certainly it's not the quick be all end all kind of thing where it's you snap your fingers and bam, there are magically your leads appear and they're all amazingly high quality.
Right.
It really takes time, but that also plays well into your and my approach of thinking long term and setting up foundations that long term consistently can we reap rewards from it long term consistently and not just a quick blip and trying to sell the business or something like that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that wouldn't have worked because it was not a quick blip. But no, I think it's been great. Now we see, to kind of give some numbers for those interested. It's we were doing 2 to 4 sales calls a week back in October, September, 9 months ago, and now it's up to 6 to 8 typically. And to see that doubling of sales calls is really that's the leading indicator.
With a better quality of lead as well. We quite successfully eliminated, not 100%, but eliminated, our filter criteria is better, but also due to our positioning and branding updates, we are getting more of the right leads into these funnels.
I would agree. Yeah. So the bulk of the new business has come in through growth in SEO and growth in like leads from generative AI as well. Those are both big factors. And then the other one that we worked on and really intentionally was referrals. And there's still more to do. There's more to do in all these channels. But we really wanted to take the goodwill we had with clients. We do such good work for 70, 80 shows. We knew that could translate into more clients like them. And so one thing that we did intentionally last year was start to offer to our top shows, hey, if you just plug us in your show notes every week, we will give you a discount for the year, essentially. And that's been great. I mean, it's a discount for them, which is awesome because some of our best clients are getting cheaper rates than they would have been, and then it's giving us just deal flow that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise. We're getting
reputation-wise, it's also great, right, to be connected with these kind of shows because, of course, we know that we produce the shows, but lots of other people don't.
Right. So two simple things that have really led to the growth results we want. Although I will say that the other things that are going show promise too. I mean, we brought on a salesperson in September, and he's been doing great and just continued to kind of get better at this, and he's closing deals consistently. We've been able to upsell some of our existing clients some new services and things like that, which has helped. We've changed pricing structures around how we launch shows, and that's helped as well. Yeah. So again, all this stuff in tandem is just
that might be something that's interesting for the listeners. I think we found a very elegant solution for the launch program that we lead our clients to that ensures they're going somewhat fast enough, like not procrastinating throughout this process, and at the same time we are getting revenue out of that.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, they become regular production clients.
Yeah. So for context, when we inherited the business, bought it, we inherited a pricing plan that was like a flat fee of a couple $1,000s or something for your podcast launch. I think maybe it was $4,000. And so we looked at that flat fee and said, well, that's fine, but some shows take a lot longer to launch than others. And there's no way to force them to go faster because some of these are big organizations that have many stakeholders involved, and they need to have meeting every week or two for 8 to 12 weeks. And it's a lot of time. And so we realized we could align incentives by basically charging people a monthly fixed retainer or set retainer to launch their show. So the really fast shows, the small shows, like individuals that want to launch a show, they can get done in a month easily, and they pay much less. And then the ones that are really big companies, they end up taking 3, 4, 5 months, and they pay more. But we do a lot more work and ongoing, sort of management of expectations and things. So it tends to be fair.
The nice thing there is that in the first quarter of 2025, we had like a period where we had 11 simultaneous launch clients and then getting these retainer payments in consistently. That was had really nice impact on our top line revenue. Yeah. And so far this year, every month is a record month in terms of revenue created, which is nice to see.
Yeah.
And while at the same time, I think that's also something like you talked about highlights, and the thing I'm proud of is like last year we implemented a code of conduct, and I'm proud to say that we really adhere to it and we put our money where our mouth is. And so we made some changes to the clients that we serve based on the code of conduct. Yeah. And so we purposefully are losing out on some revenue that we could generate for the business. Right. And still, every month this year so far is a record revenue business.
Yep. Yeah, that has been interesting. And that's something I talk to a lot of small business owners about is like, the answer is not that you need more clients, is you need more of the right clients. So what we found were there were certain kinds of genres of shows, let's call it, political, religious shows that have just a lot of controversy. And what that leads to is a distraction for our editors. Some editors don't want to work on certain shows with certain political bents. And as well as it's hard for us to market those, that we work with those shows, because we don't want to alienate people. We're not really in that business. I mean, the bulk of our business is not these, sort of divisive shows. And so it just wasn't worth it at some point.
And at the same time, these shows obviously have a right to exist. So
absolutely,
what was really great was that you took the time and helped them find somebody to take over the work that we have been doing for them.
Exactly. We gave them a lot of warning. We gave them 6 months of warning, and we introduced them to people that could be a good fit. And, again, like me personally, I think anyone who wants a podcast, I believe in free speech in general, is assuming some limitations. But in general, I'm like all for you having a podcast. It's just that for a business like ours, we kind of get to choose, do we want to service those ones that have these controversial takes and things that are hard to.
They have the right to talk about it. We have the right as a business not to work with them.
Right,
Easy. Yeah.
right. So, but again, ultimately, it really has allowed us to focus on the shows that are our sort of core market, and we do better work for them because we know how to do those shows repeatedly.
Yes.
We work with other ones anyway. Another highlight to me as I look back in the last few months has been Draft.dev over the last year has really been able to close deals with bigger companies in a way that we have not historically been able to. So we can't talk about a lot of specifics just because of, NDAs and all that stuff, but some of it's on our website. But yeah, I've been really proud of, 3 years ago when I was leading sales there, it was very much we work with startups, early stage companies, and partly a necessity and partly due to the opportunity we see, we've been able to move that business up market and work with some really big players in the developer tool space. And it's great because we're learning how to work with these big companies, which is a really good skill to have, I think, as an agency. And for the business, it's allowed us to have more stability. We can sign 1 and 2 year contracts with these companies, whereas the early stage startups are up and down depending on their funding cycles and where they're at. And so much harder to sort of build a long-term team around small companies like that.
Yeah. One other thing that's been a highlight for me that's adjacent to the operating companies is just that we have created a work environment for you and myself that allowed me to take 1 day per week off to be with my daughter. I work from home and I can see my 16-month-old daughter, every day. I see her grow up. I can spend real quality time with her. And it's a privilege, and I want to be very aware that I'm experiencing something really special because a lot of people don't get to do that. And I'm really proud that we follow through on our in my quarterly reports, I write at the very beginning our investment thesis and how we want to build this whole thing, basically. And one thing is like work-life balance and having time for family is very, very key to us. And we are living it. And I think that's very important because oftentimes you feel like if you have core values, for example, you want that for your employees, but then when the going gets tough, you yourself don't adhere to them and you double down and instead of doing the thing that you want for others, you're not doing for yourself. But we are actually doing it, and that feels good. And I'm really very aware that looking around my friends and other people that I know where they have kids, and like I know somebody who has a young daughter, and sometimes in the morning she's not up yet, and he's leaving, and he comes back when she's in bed, and so he doesn't see her at all. And that's just it's sad that this is a reality for a lot of people, and I'm very appreciative that it's not that for me.
And for our teams too, I think this is something that we've always been more flexible on than a typical employer. And like we have team members that need to cut out at 3 every day, and they work evenings or weekends or whatever. Like we've got a lot of people on weird schedules compared to maybe a traditional 9 to 5. And I think that's something I've always enjoyed, and I can appreciate because I'm a parent too, and I've got days where I have to pick up kids early or be off because of one thing or another. So I think building that environment for ourselves and our team as they need it is really cool too.
Yeah, right. And we have the metrics. I mean, client satisfaction is very high in both companies, and the employees are happy. So it thankfully it's working.
It's working. We talked about this in our big planning yesterday session, but one of the things that we really want to build as we're continuing to grow is this value of being flexible and giving people the work-life balance that they want while also maintaining accountability, because it is a balance there. Like, it's not like a free ride either. Like we don't have that much money. We can't just pay you for nothing. You do have to produce the results. And so I do think that's important, but I think it's fun to be able to highlight the upside of that.
Yeah. And I do think, so far all the people that we have in our teams, they don't want to freeload. They really want to contribute, which I guess, of course, because if they would, then we would not work with them.
Right. Yeah. Anything else that's been a highlight for you? I think one thing, this was a few months, 2 months ago, we were really focused on deal flow and looking for new acquisitions, and we've tapered that down. We'll talk about that in a bit. But even so, we still were able to close, one new acquisition this year,
Yeah.
a small one. Bought and kind of merged in clients from a competitor to Draft.dev. That was really cool, and it all just happened because of the long-term keeping in touch work, which I spend a lot of time on, and I always wonder if it's worth it. And then this kind of thing happens, you're like, oh, I guess that was worth it.
Yeah, I mean, all kudos there to you. I write about this in the quarterly reports as well, but basically for us, it's about building relationships for a long time, and then at some point the timing might be right or it might never, but then you still want to do something nice for the people you interact with.
Yeah.
Right? And so for you, it's just like you struck the timing perfectly there, but that was because there was an existing relationship. And stuff like this, I think, again, works when you have a long-term mindset, which we do.
Yeah.
And so, right, because some of the stuff is like, of course, we could measure how many emails are you writing to how many different contexts. Like, no, there's a mutual trust here that we're working on meaningful stuff. And sometimes there's no quantifiable way in the like short or midterm, but now we have a quantifiable way because we have an acquisition thanks to that.
Yeah.
Right? But even if there wouldn't be an acquisition, I would still be very much of the belief that it's worth it.
Yeah.
Because you just pay it forward, and at some point, I don't even know if I believe in karma or something like that, but it's just you want to do the right thing. And so that's obviously better to build relationships with somebody whose business you potentially want to buy than just coming out of nowhere.
Right. I think here's something that maybe I would classify as one of the most underrated skills is follow-up. And not just one follow-up, but long-term follow-up. So again, an example of that is, you talk to somebody 2 years ago who's a competitor, it's got, and you're like, yeah, it's good to meet you. You just, you trade stories, you stay in touch. And then 2 years later, they're like, hey, I'm ready to move on. You interested in buying? I mean, that's happened many times already. And some of them we've acted on, some we haven't. And I think that's something that I realize is they've probably gotten outreach from dozens of other people wanting to buy their business over the years. But how many of them stayed in touch for 2 years and legitimately just asked them how they're doing and checked in and said, hey, and nothing, no pressure, not a hard sale. I think the same thing with client acquisition, like we, especially with these bigger companies, we see this happen all the time where we had this one-time meeting at a conference a year ago, and then we stay in touch, and every so often in a quarterly, touch point, they say, oh yeah, I remember you guys. You want to work with us this quarter? It's like, boom, there it is. And so again, people are I've just observed this from a lot of small businesses that I've done work with. They're so bad at staying in touch. I think it's just an easy way to stand out. Like, just follow up.
But it's got to be structured and organized.
Absolutely.
Like, ideally, you reach out with somewhat meaningful messages, right?
And maybe that's the skill. That's the skill.
And I think a lot of people feel like, sure, that's important, but it's never important enough.
Yeah.
Right? So they don't prioritize it because they have an actual business to run.
Yeah. I think that's always an excuse, but again, like you got to build it in a way that gives you that the time to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, lowlights. What's been tough? What's been the setbacks? What are we fighting through?
Yeah, I mean, the setback clearly has been our main approach to how we want to get money to buy businesses has been impacted a lot. There were some policy changes to SBA loans, and that has impacted us. We were quite close to pulling the trigger on one acquisition and had to pull out in the end. Yeah. So that has been a true lowlight for me. And it's like, now this is not just, this wasn't just this one event. This has like longer lasting ripple effects into how we do things.
That's right. So to summarize, for those who don't follow along with the SBA's policy changes, obviously, the Small Business Administration backstops the kinds of debt that we would get, and we got on our last big acquisition. And basically, they've changed their loan program to prohibit people who are not either green card holders or citizens from being on the cap table at all. It used to be that Manuel, being from Vienna and Austria, you could be a 49% owner and it would be fine. And that's how we structured it. And so it all worked. And now it's 0% owner until you get a green card. And so, the current administration aside, I think like this is one of those kind of like punches in the face that you get as a small business owner, where like you've got a plan, you're moving forward, you think you know what you're doing, and then boom, like just
Yeah, that's
smacks
just
you.
a surprise, right?
Yeah.
But I think the important thing is roll with the punches, right?
Yeah.
Okay, this is a new reality.
Yeah.
So
We can't
there's,
change it.
there's no, like, sure, maybe you allow yourself like a few moments to complain and suffer in self-pity.
Sure.
But really, what's the use?
Yeah, there's no point.
So it's just, okay, gotta plow ahead and figure out, okay, what's the new reality and how are we working on that?
That's right.
And so we somewhat define a plan. If you maybe want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
It's certainly not our ideal scenario, but I choose to very actively pick the positives out of it because there's some exciting stuff in there.
Yeah.
But I mean, it stinks, right? It's not what we had in mind, and it might impact us for like a year or two, or maybe longer. We don't know yet, right?
Yeah.
So that's sad, but at the same time, okay, we get the opportunity to work on things that we wouldn't have worked on that are interesting.
Yes, totally. Yeah, I think that's the upside to the position we're in is we aren't under any sort of obligation to buy something right away, buy a company right away. Like, I think one of the advantages to the way we're doing this is we didn't raise outside equity, capital, and that would typically put you under these time constraints because investors want their return. We didn't, so while we don't have as much money because of that, we have more freedom and more ability to take a pause or work on something else for a while. So there's obviously, we'll talk about the plan going forward. That was definitely a bummer. I think also, I've really, I've realized as we've been working on some leadership transition stuff with bringing in a leader to run Draft. I've realized that I need to work on my collaboration as a leader. Like, I think this was a bit of a punch in the face to me. Was like I was sort of I have had trouble kind of letting go of the reins and not just jumping in and fixing all the problems myself, because I tend to be a jump in there and make a big decision and just push. And I got some really candid feedback from one of our teammates that, like, hey, look, you can't just come in here and steamroll everybody. And that wasn't my intent, but it certainly felt like that to people. And I think so getting that kind of feedback as a leader is like reminds me that I still have work to do there. And I think that's something that I want to, I love getting that feedback because it gives me like, oh, well, good. Now I know I can get better. But it's also hard to hear. And it's kind of like,
which is a good attitude, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think what's interesting, I think about this, I ask for feedback a lot, but rarely do people give it to me because it's intimidating, right? Like we're the bosses. Like,
yeah, and it's interesting because I do feel like in general, we either established or inherited a culture where people are comfortable with speaking openly. And it feels like to me they are, but then very clearly there are still some inhibitions. And I think that, it's truly, like, we don't even care so much about titles or anything, right? It's like, of course, there's different levels of accountability and risk you're taking. And so there are certain roles people take, but really, like, everybody can come with an idea, and oftentimes we even just, if you think that's good, implement it. You don't even need to get our permission, right? And still, people really struggle, especially in this case, hold back too long to provide that feedback. Because especially, right, I mean, they know you, and they know you won't lash out and like retribution and stuff like that, right? It's like, to the contrary, you're seeing it as a learning opportunity, which is great attitude, but still it was like so like painful for them to get the words out there.
I think we were talking about this yesterday, but it made me realize or remember back, I haven't had a boss in a long time. And even when I worked at startups, I had founders who were almost more collaborators with me because I was the first employee. So I never felt like a regular employee. I always had a seat at the table at the board meetings. Like, as much as I was technically employed, my founder bosses were not telling me, Karl, do this, Karl, do this. It was like very much collaborative. So anyway, I have not had a relationship with a typical boss since I was in college. And I thought about that and I was like, I forget that other people have had these relationships with bosses where you're not allowed to go tell your boss they're wrong. And I've always had that luxury. And so I think it was really insightful.
Again, we're privileged.
Yeah, but it was
that's the
insightful
case,
to remember that like other people have these sort of, hang-ups with they're afraid, a little afraid of a boss. And I'm a boss, and I gotta like remember that I gotta work harder to get that, solicit that feedback. And so that's something I've been
it reminds me of like where that also can be like dangerous in terms of inefficiency. It was like, I remember this in my own company back then. We had like a Slack channel, and at that point we had like 50 employees or something like that. And there was a general channel, and my co-founder, CEO, sometimes would just in that channel write an idea. It's like, hey, this could be interesting. And so because he's the CEO, people now, like, there's no call to action, nothing, but they're a bit distracted by it. It's like, okay, do we have to work on this?
Yeah.
Should somebody investigate this? And he just wanted to be helpful and share something with everybody quickly. And then once we realized that, we made the strict rule, no vague messages in the general chat.
Yeah.
Always go to dedicated group chats or dedicated single people, because it's such a distraction. Because even if you explicitly say you don't need to work on this, you're the CEO and somebody might want to be extra like helpful and please you, and then they work on it, even though you explicitly said don't work on it, because it's just a distraction.
I feel like we see that sometimes with our teams when we drop a, hey, this isn't urgent but this would be something, and then they jump into it and you're like, oh, you didn't need to. So the low lights, and then kind of jumping back to we got a little punch in the face from the SBA. We can't do the debt we had thought we were going to do. We're kind of going into the action plan going forward. We've got a few things in the works. I mean, long term, I think it's possible that the SBA route could open back up. Depending on citizenship pathway and all that stuff, that's all out of our control, though, right? So we don't know. I think there's also the possibility we've been talking to people about. Maybe we look at private debt, or we look at some kind of, certain kind of equity partners. Again, it's not high on my priority list, but something I'm thinking about and going to research. And then in the meantime, what else are we working on as far as like, how else can we spend our time and kind of continue to grow? Yeah,
something where I'm now seeing the positives here and an opportunity to work on is to like build this systems on the holdco level of, this is how we establish inbound marketing in an operating company. This is how we establish outbound sales. This is how we set up a referral program, and finding default playbooks and, from the tech stack to email templates, like quite technical in some ways, but have it generic enough that we can just plug that into any kind of opco. And it's a great playground at the moment because we have two businesses where we can implement that, and to think about, okay, how can we make it streamlined enough for it to be applicable in any kind of other business, right? Because if you're like, sure, let's say we have the tech stack for how we do sales, but the sales funnel in every business will look differently, and the stages might look differently. But how can we create like a common understanding and language, like how do we define an opportunity for us internally? What is like a deal? When are we allowed to open a deal, right? And sure, the triggers for this might be different per different company, but having a shared understanding of how we perceive this thing, that's quite exciting to me. And the next step then obviously will be implement them in one of the two companies that we have, and then hand over that teach somebody to be able to implement that in future companies. And that is something that personally excites me a lot.
I'm excited about it too. I think I've learned, I've owned Draft.dev for a little over 5 years, and I've learned a lot about sales in those 5 years. I came into it complete novice to sales. I was an engineer. I was not at all, had no idea what I was doing, and I was making up every day. And I've learned from both peers and mentors and employees, and just reading, osmosis, whatever, all the sources, learned a lot about it. And then, you similarly have like learned a lot in the last few years about marketing these service businesses and how to actually get deal flow going. And like, combining that knowledge and then building a standardized playbook. It sounds obvious, but it's something we haven't taken the time to do because we've been like, we got a salesperson. They're fine. So it's working. We got acquisitions to do, so we're too busy. Like we're not going to do that. So I think it's good to kind of like turn the focus inward for a bit here and be like, all right, what can we do to get the most out of the business we already have if we can't buy something new right away?
Yeah, and I think like the two positive things here are, I'm sure there are more positive things, but it's like, let's assume we find another business that we want to purchase, and let's say it's a good running business, but the owner has been burned out and all the sales have been done by the owner. And so we can take over and we have a ready to execute playbook. Like, this is the tech stack that we're doing. These are the first few campaigns that we're running, and it just lets us hit the ground much faster.
Yeah.
And we have warranted confidence that this will at least stick a bit.
Yeah.
Right? It's like everything might not be replicable. What worked in two other business might not work in a third business.
Right.
But some of the stuff definitely will be at least helpful to the business.
Right.
And then also, there might be a leader that after, let's say there's a CEO in the company and we acquire a company and the CEO turns to become the leader. We can provide really helpful input of what we have seen working in other companies and help them implement that. And we are almost like a service provider, a consultancy to the leader of the business.
Yeah, totally. I think that's really exciting. This is something we haven't talked a lot about, but I think ultimately all this stuff this internal knowledge we're building would be great for both, building our expertise and internally improving our companies, but maybe it's something we use as marketing for the holdco too. Like, we're going to leverage the fact that we know how to do growth. We can share a lot of this stuff like with people. So I'm sure we'll share more about this as we get this built.
That's it's just prioritization, right? Because to be honest, up until the change in the SBA loan policy happened, deal flow, and sourcing has been going really well. So there was no real need. Yesterday we worked on the values and core values of the holdco and your and my values basically. And those are always nice to communicate. But really, if deal flow is so nice, there's no urgency in publicizing this stuff, right?
Right. Yeah. So in addition to standardizing some of our operational things, sales, marketing, some of the maybe the operational efficiency things as well, we've also worked on the standardizing our bookkeeping and accounting. That's already in a pretty good spot. We've been talking about that same with the forward-facing projections and cash flow. Is something that's on our radar too. One of the other things we've been for the last few months starting to get our feet moving on is a leadership transition at Draft.dev. So in the long run, to kind of our vision that we see is we've got these individual operating companies that are separate. There may be some shared services they can all access, but we want to have a leader in each of these operating companies to be the CEO. It's a unique role because they're going to be part of a broader community of CEOs and small companies.
And we can facilitate
communication and community. It'll be really cool. I mean, this is pie in the sky here, but at the same time, like the next step is figure out how to put one leader in one company, right? Like we've never done that, so we don't know how to do that. And so we're building a pathway for someone to get to get a promotion into that CEO role at one of the companies and at Draft.dev. And it's been really interesting. We don't know what we don't know, so there's so many like unknowns. She's facing the same challenges as us as far as she doesn't know either. She's never done this. So it's going to be really, that's going to be an interesting journey. And I'm excited to see how that progresses. And we've got some ideas and things we want to keep moving towards. And sort of, it's like we're slowly handing one piece at a time over to her and training her and all that.
It's great to see for her, especially how professional she's taking it, because it's like communication hygiene is really important there because there's like high potential for some very awkward situations, right? Because where does she feel like, I'm overstepping a line? And we want to encourage ownership mindset, but at the same time, we're not totally there yet to hand this over completely because there are like lots of construction sites that we need to figure out how to like resolve these like problem areas, right? Yeah. And so the most important thing here is open communication and a willingness from all parties to consistently work on improving the status quo, to get to the point where we fully have handed over the thing, knowing that for all of us, it's like we're doing it for the first time, right? Yeah. And so not everything will go smoothly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm sure we'll screw some things up. I've talked to a lot of people about this in the last 6 months, and, I've gotten a lot of stories from founders who have put CEOs in place and collected a lot of just these anecdotes and what worked, what didn't. And I am 100% confident that it's something that can be learned and that there is a way to make this work. But I'm also 100% confident that I will make mistakes before I get it right, because it's a hire in a role that is very hard to do and very dynamic. And so who knows? This will be an interesting topic to keep coming back to.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think one thing I come back to a lot is I want reps. I want practice at it because it's a hard thing. One thing that I think about a lot in my philosophy as an entrepreneur is when something is hard, figure out a way to do it 10 times more than anybody else does it, because that you will get good at things you do lots of times. You will be terrible at first, but that's why most people don't do it. And you get past that terrible point and you start to get okay at it. And all of a sudden people think you're a miracle worker because you're okay at this thing that everybody else says is impossible. And it's not, it's just you had reps, and the only way to get reps is to try it. So yeah. I'm excited about that. The last, simultaneously, we're looking at internally at the companies and putting leaders in place, and then keeping an eye out, because sometimes deals are going to come to us that we didn't expect. I've had emails this week from people who are like, kind of, it's like, I need to sell, and maybe you guys are the right people to do it. I know that, even if we don't have the cash up front. So there's always going to be some of that happening too behind the scenes. We'll keep an eye out for the opportunistic stuff that makes sense.
Certainly. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna pull up my notes, and you guys can cut this out in the editing, because
the next is like AI impact.
Yeah. Oh, actually, observations from deals we looked at. I thought this might be interesting because we've looked at a lot at the beginning of the year, and we saw a lot of service businesses. Is there any generalizations we can take out of that, or do you want to skip it?
The only thing I'm thinking was dev spotlight and the not willingness to go another round because of all the changes that AI is doing.
Well, okay, so this is a good segue topic. Okay, we're coming back. Okay, so another thing that I wanted to talk about is, we got to look at a lot of deals at the beginning of the year, especially the first half of the year, where we were actively in acquisition mode. And, maybe I do a lot more of the talking one-on-one with founders, so I probably hear a lot of the anecdotal stuff. You see more of the data because you tend to look at the books after, and we kind of talk about it after. So what are some of the things there? What's something you noticed from looking at those deals, and just whether it's, data-wise or just, getting feelings from founders? What did you take away from that months?
Yeah, I think what I've observed is more times than before, the reason to sell was a fatigue or maybe / unwillingness to go through this next cycle, because AI is impacting a lot at the moment, and lots of owners know there's big change coming, especially the kind of businesses we looked at. It's okay, there's a big change coming. Let's say I'm 60 years old. I've been doing this thing for 15 years or whatnot, and it's working okay enough, but it's not the amazing high growth business. And now this big wave of change is coming. And with AI, for example, content marketing and AI, there's literal changes literally every 1 or 2 weeks that you need to keep up with. Do you have the energy and the willingness to do this? And I've seen lots of people, it is my assumption that this is one of the main reasons why they're looking to sell right now, is because they see what's coming up on the horizon. And it's a multi-year high input of energy in an uncertain time. And they're just not willing to do that, which is good for us because that gives us discounts. Because they want to sell right now.
Right. It's interesting because on one hand, I agree that there's a lot of owners, whether they'll say it or not, something under the surface there is they're just kind of scared of what this technology is going to mean for the industry. And you're right. It's not that they couldn't pivot the business and they don't see a possibility to go forward. It's just that it's a lot of energy. It's a lot of you have to rebuild things, and that's a lot of work. And some people have kind of reached that point in their life where they don't want to go through another cycle like that. On the flip side, it's also I think it's made some buyers nervous to get into agencies, which is good for us too. There's more buyers who are like sort of staying away from businesses that are going to be impacted by AI until this thing shakes out and we figure out where, SEO is going to go or content's going to go or all that. And so,
the calculation is, are you losing more business or are you improving margins well enough that it helps?
Right. And if you're an acquirer, it's sometimes hard to know if you don't know that space very well. If you're looking to buy a business, you're like, well, I don't know how to automate this, but maybe somebody in our space will, and we'll get killed by it, And anyway, so it just introduces a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, and I think like what you and I talked about is like, it's like, do you really want to eliminate just 100% very like binary a specific industry? Not really, but what you want to look at is who is the end user of the service of the businesses that we are thinking about buying.
Yeah.
Because if you have a certain like persona or a certain type of buyer of the services that we provide, then they might be much more lagging to adopting these practices, and that kind of stuff can really help.
Absolutely. So my take on this, whenever people ask me about the impact of AI on service businesses, especially agencies, I say, like, easy analogy. Did the emergence of Excel and then QuickBooks kill the accounting agency? Absolutely not. And does an accounting agency look drastically different than it did 50, 60 years ago? Absolutely. It changed the makeup of it. It probably changed the margins of it. It changed the way that they work internally. But some businesses fundamentally will outsource non-core competency work to agencies. Other businesses will hire it in-house. That's never going to change, in my opinion. I mean, barring the collapse of the business as we know it, So I think that fundamentally, will there be people who hire marketing agencies to manage AI-based workflows? Absolutely. Will those marketing agencies look very different from what they look like today or 10 years ago? Absolutely again. But that's always been true in marketing agencies. We don't live in an era of Mad Men agencies anymore where we do a big pitch on and talk about the billboards we're going to buy for our clients. Like, nobody cares anymore. It's like all performance-based marketing. And so anyway, I think like, yes, things are changing, but it's not going away. It's just you have to be ready to change with it.
And that's why what we talked about also is like rolling with the punches, and it's never like you have a multi-year period where you just lean back and everything's running smoothly. No, you always need to adapt to what's happening. It's I think very rare if you're a business owner, especially if you have multiple businesses. That everything is just smoothly going in the background, and you'd have all this time to work on this super extremely high level stuff and vision. And it's important to make time for that, but really oftentimes somewhere a fire is burning.
That's right. Yeah. And you can let some fires burn, and then other fires you got to step in. And I agree. I've always railed against the people who want passive income from a business. Like, it's just not realistic. I mean, if you want passive income, buy dividend stocks, but the return's tiny. If you want high returns, you inherently have to take risk. It's the way markets work. And so to think you can, sit back and just forever collect a check from your business without ever touching it, never having a change in direction or a change in strategy, it's just naive. I mean, nobody works that way. Even at big companies, it doesn't work that way. So I think that we embrace this, and this is part of the growth and learning how to roll with that stuff and get better at handling it rather than fighting it.
Yeah, and again, I think attitude is important here, right? Okay, it's like, this is not what we thought would happen, but let's look at the stuff that can take out of it that's positive.
Right. Yeah, AI is really interesting, generative AI specifically in marketing, because it does augment, at least, and maybe will replace a lot of the tactical work that we do. And, whether that is writing cold emails, I'm sure a lot of that stuff's AI written now, or it's researching people. It can be really good as a research tool. It can be good as a place to get you started on articles, and in some cases fully write articles. Again, it's like, depends on the topic area, depends on the technical knowledge needed, but it's certainly a tool that is good and continuing to improve, and like you said, changing every month. The other thing that we're paying attention to on the AI side is how generative AI affects the way people find information. So again, having these content heavy businesses, SEO has almost been part of both the way we get clients and the way our businesses drive results for their clients. What's your take? Because you've been in SEO and marketing a long time. Like, what's your take on AI and its role in finding information, and how do we stay relevant when search results are going to be totally different in 5 years?
Yeah, it's really interesting because we're seeing a clear uptake in people using ChatGPT or Claude or other things over traditional Google or other search engines. So I think a lot of these businesses are currently figuring out how to monetize and how to get like relevant data in front of the searchers. I think, yes, more and more these like Gen AI searches and search results will become extremely important, that we or our clients show up in there.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe that the space is so nascent that it hasn't really fully been figured out yet. And what you're seeing right now is like the early days of SEO. It's the Wild West. The black hat like activities work.
Yeah.
But that's not going to be for a long time, obviously, right? But it's all of these businesses are incentivized that humans still create content that's important for other humans. And so they need to figure out a way how there can be economy around that. Yeah. And so for us as people that are trying to work with these new technologies and are somewhat reliant on them, right? We require our clients at Draft.dev to show up in these results of ChatGPT, for example, right? What are the best, cybersecurity startups or whatever, right? So our clients need to show up there. So our role is to stay extremely updated on this because our clients don't want to. And so our role, for example, with Draft.dev, previously we have been very much perceived as content output and execution. And we were totally capable of also doing strategy. But I think it will be much more now around strategic guidance and discernment, picking this path because of X, plus being able to then execute the content that they need for their lead generation. And so it's really interesting because right now, in my opinion, what we can do is stay very up to date, and there are already established practices like schema markup is really important. ChatGPT has a partnership deal with Reddit, so it can crawl data from Reddit, which are supposedly all real humans, giving suggestions to things, and that's being pulled in, right? So it's important to show up in more Reddit communities, these kind of things. But those are tactics. But really on a high level, it's so nascent that stuff still needs to be figured out. Totally. And so there's a big opportunity for us, especially with, in my opinion, with Draft.dev, but also with the podcast consultant, to provide value to our clients by just staying on top of this, because they don't have the bandwidth to do this at all. And they shouldn't, to be honest.
Well, again, like this comes back to some companies will outsource their non-core competencies, and SEO or GEO, if you're, for appearing in AI results, like either way, it's not a core competency for most of our clients. It's not the primary thing they sell, so they don't necessarily want to in-house it. It just makes me think, and I think this is where we've been people in SEO have gotten a little spoiled in the last few years because it's kind of stabilized as an industry. Like there's a best practice way to do things, and for the most part, like everybody knows it, and it's kind of like it all works like consistently. And now we've hit this like explosion of, we don't know how any of this works anymore. And like you said, like it's all changing all the time.
The nice thing though is if you, of course, right, you in content marketing, you write for the humans, but then you apply some best practices that are good for the machines, obviously, right?
Right.
But if
a lot of the fundamentals are the same.
Exactly. Yeah. If you truly cared though about providing a good piece of content to the human, all of this stuff is still extremely relevant to show up in results from ChatGPT and Claude and stuff like that. So, if you did the trick short-termism thinking, that's not working anymore, and hasn't been working for a while, I think. Yeah. But if you did the right thing and had the user in mind and provide value, that kind of stuff, and play the long game, right? then that all is really positively impacting AI.
Yeah, I would agree. I think a lot of the fundamentals are the same, and it's not. It is about like building trust with a knowledgeable human audience by showing them like good information, and then if you're doing that, you do tend to get rewarded by both the generative AI as well as the search engines. That said, there are certainly some like micro optimization on top of that make a difference, and they're going to change constantly.
Which is like we've been doing it for ourselves, so this might be interesting for the listeners. Like we're currently thinking about for Draft.dev to start offering a content refresh package, and so we're dog feeding the solution for ourselves basically, and so we have looked at our own content on our Draft.dev blog and on the TPC, the podcast consultant blog, and applied the best practices that we defined would have good impact to show up more in AI results. And so we started implementing this 2 months ago. And for Draft.dev, because we have a really nice base of content, we have over 100 blog posts, and we applied these best practices, which are like, code changes and markup changes, and the other stuff is just text changes and where the stuff is located on the actual website, on the page. And at Draft.dev, we've seen a 13x increase in AI citations, in AI overviews. And it's like the baseline number was not that low. So it is actually, I was very positively surprised. And the podcast consultant, we saw a 3x increase in getting the citations. The interesting thing there is, the citations are still, I see them more as a brand thing still, because Google is playing around. In the US, you do have in the AI overviews the links. In other like geographies, you don't yet. So very clearly, they are aware that businesses are complaining about not getting the click-through. So now they're linking inside the AI overviews to the actual page where they draw the information from. And on the right side, you have the citations, and there this is the domain name. So domain name, you look at it, you get an impression. That's brand. That's not the click-through. That's not the traffic you can cookie and send retargeting tags to. That's not a potential lead because they never left Google. So that is still tricky, but at least I'm confident in saying now that we have a system defined that we can run for clients and ourselves to get more AI citations in Google's AI overviews. And I'm pretty confident we also found a way to do something similar for output for ChatGPT. And so that is quite positive, while at the same time being very aware that the things that we're applying should stay a best practice, but who knows what's happening in this space right now, Again, like Google is playing around with all of these things, like they have AI mode now. Okay, so it's basically a ChatGPT within Google. Like the chat interface with follow-up questions, It's interesting, if I put myself into Google's shoes there, I would, like, at the end, they need to run ads in those AI chat outputs, And so the longer the conversation is and the more follow-up questions there are, the more precise the ad that they serve can be. And so the click-through and the conversion will be much higher. So if I'm Google, I'm thinking like, this is great because I show fewer ads, which is a good end user result. I get more money per click, and the user hypothetically gets a real conversion, like a thing that they actually were looking for, It's like top 10 hotels in the Caribbean. And one of them is an ad, and that's the perfect fitting one. And so that will be possible because like I can understand why they're doing it, but in the meantime, they need to figure out the people that provide that actual content. How do they incentivize them to keep on providing that content?
I think that's going to be the really big factor in people trusting generative AI in the long term is going to be, can they actually deliver really good results? We were talking about this earlier as one of the potential threats to any service business is that, like AI could build an AI version of what we do and it could be as good, or there could be somebody who builds an AI version of what we do and it's just as good. But the fundamental problem there is maybe the technology gets there, but if the human trust isn't there, people still want you to oversee it. Like they want to make sure somebody's in the loop that checks it.
And we've seen this like, anecdotally, with some recent new clients at Draft.dev, for example, yes, they want execution and output from us, but they're asking us a lot of strategic questions And the experience, like decades-long experience, is worth something, obviously, even with something that's impacting our industry as hard as AI is right now. Having somebody who has seen a lot of different scenarios and just, on the spot being able to respond to a quite complex question, that is, I think this like strategic guidance will become more and more important, because a lot of they don't have to be extremely tech savvy, but more leaning towards, hey, I want to try new technologies, right? Yeah. They will dabble around with AI, and for the very simple stuff, they might be very satisfied with it. Yeah. But on the strategic level, it is still extremely hard for somebody that dabbles around in AI to provide the context to the AI that's right. You get back meaningful.
Totally. And I think that's the case for very vertical focused agencies like we have, but I think that's where that's going to become more and more important too. When you're a generalist agency, you don't have the knowledge to give the generative AI the context that it needs to actually deliver good output. And so if you're an agency that some of your clients are lawyers, some are doctors, some are tech companies, some are, random brick and mortar businesses, you end up with, there's no you don't know that industry. You don't know how to tailor the tools for that industry. And you're just going to have worse output from those tools. That is of course you can do it, but it's going to be worse than what somebody who's focused. Yeah. And I think clients are going to realize that, and it's going to be a ding to your trust when you give them back stuff that's just inaccurate or fundamentally bad and shows unawareness of their industry. I think that's already been happening before generative AI, but I think it's just you're going to get even more sort of prominent, because anybody can start saying I'm a copywriter for whatever vertical they want, and just plug it into ChatGPT and get a bunch of shit back that doesn't work. Anyway, so I think it's going to be very interesting. It's lowered the barrier to entry in a way for a lot of these services, but also will raise the bar for success and for building trust.
Yeah.
What are you learning these days besides the AI stuff? We've been talking about that for a while. What else is top of your mind that you've been thinking about and learning about, and kind of getting I don't know more info on?
Well, on a personal level, parenting.
That's a good one.
Dealing with my endeavor to be a good dad, but also be a good business partner, and wanting to work on interesting stuff, and just dealing with the whole balance of work is very important to me, but obviously it's not the most important thing. You have a family, and dealing with my guilt around still wanting to work, it's that's something I'm not grappling with, but which is quite quite high up in my mental thing at the moment. I'm very appreciative of you. You have 2 kids, you've been going through this, and so the situation, and you're totally okay with how I'm handling things. It's more my expectations of myself that I'm somewhat disappointed, that I feel okay, I'm the output is still okay, but it could be better. Obviously.
I remember. I mean, again, I think it's good that we're at this similar stage in life, because we can kind of empathize, and we know what each other are going through very well. You're right. I mean, I remember this distinctly. My wife has a very 9 to 5, you have to show up and be there kind of job, and I have this very flexible, I'm the owner, I'm the boss kind of job. And so when a kid gets sick and they got to miss school's closed, something happens and I've got to go pick somebody up early, it usually falls to me. And we were talking about the challenge of that, because it's I have for myself this high standard of I want to show up and do the work and be doing impactful things, but the reality is somebody's got to pick up this kid, and it's kind of in a lot of ways easier for me to do it.
Yeah.
And it's a complicated thing, because it's not fair, but it's also practically that's correct. And I feel a lot of guilt around it sometimes, and you do too. It's tough. Yeah.
Yeah. I was then I'm wondering, do I have my priorities straight here? And I do.
Right.
But I also know about myself.
Yeah.
If I'm usually very interested in the work that I'm doing. And of course, sometimes you work on stuff that you're like, this has to get done.
Right,
but really,
right.
we've put ourselves in a situation where we generally, I think, enjoy what we work on.
Absolutely.
And even if we have to roll with the punches, it's pretty dang nice, in my opinion, that I get the opportunity to work on the things that I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you want to keep on chipping away at it. And it's like, it's really sometimes like, am I a bad person because I feel like I'm being slowed down? So why is the priority my slowness at work? Because like, I love being a dad and I love seeing my daughter grow up, but there's still like this thing in the side of my head every now and then saying this. And I want to get better at not ignoring it, but at just being okay with it, because I know what my priorities are, and they are, the family is really important. And it's such a privilege that I get to see her grow up. A lot of people don't get to experience this. And you talked yesterday with me about, like, we both read this, but the 5 regrets of the dying. Mm-hmm. It's very important to, don't miss out on these things that you cannot get back.
Yeah. Totally.
Really, if I'm like, I don't know, implementing our sales framework 2 weeks later, I mean, who cares?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
How about you?
Oh, yeah. So I would say for me, the thing I've been learning about has been getting and giving feedback both. One of the things that, like we kind of alluded to earlier, I realized, like, I probably am not the best person or easiest person to give feedback to. One thing I know about myself is, like, I'm pretty convincing. So I think a lot of times I can kind of like convince people that I'm right even when I'm wrong. And I think that's dangerous, right? Like it's a strength and a weakness, like a lot of strengths and weaknesses are. And so I think one thing that I really have to work on is continuing to be open to feedback, but then also sort of asking for it more, getting more explicit about, you can give me feedback and I'm open to it. And I actually went to a workshop about this, and they said one of the culture, it's a cultural thing, feedback. And so to build it, you have to be in a culture where you ask for it regularly and give it regularly. And people will start to pick that up on that and be like, okay, great, that's something we can do here, and it's a safe place to do it. So I'm really going to work on that. It's a pretty small thing, but it adds up over time.
Yeah. And again, I think that it shows the type of person you are, that you actively want to receive something that might be not hurtful, but
could be difficult. Yeah. Could be something I don't want to hear. Yeah. Okay, before we get to the last question, make sure this is still recording. I'm just like paranoid. Okay, it says it's still recording.
Nice.
Yeah, we're an hour in. Okay.
Okay,
good.
Then
all right.
Books?
Yes, we'll do books last. Okay. All right. So last question. I end the podcast with this every week, and I got to ask you, what are you reading lately? What anything had an impact on you this quarter?
Yeah, I'm quite excited about the book that I'm reading right now. I haven't finished it yet, but it has made an impression on me, which is Influenced by Robert Cialdini.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically about, it's like hard-coded things in humans that bad actors could abuse, but also if you're aware of them, you realize what's happening. Mm-hmm. And so it's like just basically how you can influence people into doing things. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it talks a little bit about, like, what do salespeople do? Like, interviewed, for example, America's best car salesman, like, who's in the Guinness World Record book, right? It's like, how did that person do it? And you find this like small tricks, but the author then goes beyond the tricks and looks at the sociological and historical background of why are humans doing it. It's like they're realizing what's happening right now, but still are like agreeing with what's happening, even though they don't want to. And so it's just the examples and real life situations that are being shown in there. You can totally see yourself in them. Yeah. And it's so interesting to read in such a succinct way the reason for why this is happening.
Yeah.
So it's a highly recommended book. Again, I haven't even finished it yet, and I'm already have recommended it to 5 people.
Yeah, that sounds right at my alley. It's funny because I read a very similar. Well, I think there's some similarities between these books. A book called Super Communicators by Charles Duhigg, and he wrote a book many years ago that I read called Power of Habit, I think. But basically, they're like, kind of pop science psychology books where you're like kind of you're getting scientific and psychological research in a digestible format. So it is a lot of examples as well. One of the big theses or things I took away from that book, though, was the importance of vulnerability in building connection and empathy. So, for example, if you want to get someone to open up and truly answer questions, you have to be vulnerable as well. And that's something that this has maybe been a multi-year project for me, is like getting more vulnerable in, one-on-one conversations with people in general, or just the small groups, opening up about my struggles, things that I don't do well, things that I am, afraid of. I've always had a hard time doing that. And it's something that, really good communicators who can bring together groups of people and build consensus or convince them to do things, or sort of get alignment on things, they tend to be really good at building this vulnerability that we all feel safe to share something. And so I thought that was really interesting, and something that, kind of, I don't know, it echoed things that I've heard in other places too, and how powerful that like connection is for people.
Yeah, I'm often in awe that we've got people that, spend their life, or large chunks of their life, analyzing this stuff, and then being able to in such a clear way lay out these things.
Right.
That there are reasons why this is happening, or why this works, or it doesn't work. It's it's really cool.
Yeah, it is.
We can just tap into that knowledge.
Yeah, for sure. The other one I read that I think is worth a read is called The Challenger Sale, and they talk about like all these different types of salespeople. I've been digging really into the sales methodologies and theory and practice and stuff. And so, but one of the big takeaways I got from that one is like the best salespeople they're not relationship builders necessarily, or networkers. Like, those are good sales types, but they're not the most successful. The most successful are educators. So they go into every sale and every relationship that they build through that sale as, I'm going to teach you something that's useful for you. And it both builds trust by helping the person, giving away, something that is valuable to them, but also it kind of gives almost this preview of what it's like to work with this company, because, oh, look, they teach me things. They don't just ask for my money and in return give me something. They actually are a valuable asset. Yeah. And often what I find in sales calls when I'm talking to these people who are, a manager somewhere, they've got a boss they're afraid of, and they don't want to come to that boss without the answers. So the more I can educate them, the more I look like the winner, or help them look like the winner, the more successful I'm going to be. And so I've been really adopting that in a lot of my, sales processes and how philosophy and everything. Yeah. Cool. Well, Manny, this has been great. It's been a fun couple days together, getting to do some long-term planning. Thanks for joining on the pod. We will have this up. We'll have links to your LinkedIn if people want to follow you. Yeah, obviously, you'll see Manny at least every 3 to 6 months here on the show. Yep. But thanks for coming on.
Yes, it was great and enjoyable as always.